This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com, and I have a special Skype interview today with the daughter of adorable Adrian Adonis, Angela Paredes, who now goes by her married name, but she actually reached out to me after seeing a video of Sabu talking about Adrian's unfortunate death a few weeks ago that I posted on the Hannibal TV. So thanks for joining me. You're all the way in Colorado. How are you doing today?
I am well. Thank you for having me.
So I guess when he passed away, how old were you?
I was 8 and my sister was 2.
Okay. So your
And
memories of him are very young.
there, I have a few of them. A lot stand out, and I might hear something that I'm like, oh yeah, I do remember that. Just like your video with Sabu, I was like, yes, I do. I remember that very much. Um, he was the guy who had called my mother. Well, we were all outside with fireworks, of course. It was 4th of July. And my cousin went in the house for something. My cousin Leela did, and the phone rang, and she answered it and came out and got my mom. And I just remember my mom coming out of the house screaming that he was dead, dead, and I was like, "Who? What are you talking about?" And I guess the guy, he was, I want to say, I might have the terminology wrong, like a roadie. He was a wannabe. He didn't actually wrestle, but he was following him around and setting things up. And he had called my mom and had told her what hospital my dad was at and that he didn't make it, that they had were blinded by a light because it was on the double daylight savings time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had swerved to avoid hitting a moose. And so she had all that information, but what he did was after that, and after he went back to the motel rooms, and the motel manager, seeing he was with them earlier, let him back in, and he robbed him of everything: money, personal items, everything. He was caught, but I mean, I don't remember his name or anything like that.
So the wedding band, for instance, you never got back, I guess.
No, and I don't really remember. I know my mom had her wedding ring, but I don't know if he. I don't really remember if it was a band, like he had said, or a ring that was missing, because she had found out about him robbing all the wrestlers before. It took a week for my dad to get his body to come back through all the red tape, so he could be buried. So I don't. I think it was before, because the police were looking for this guy for quite a while. Uh, I think it was before that they had transferred my dad's body back that she knew that this guy had robbed them of everything. I'm not sure exactly how, but I remembered that she had told my sister and I this.
And
So
this
seeing
happened
this,
out.
I hadn't heard anything else about it. So seeing that interview, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that did happen.
And this happened way out in the middle of nowhere. Like he was wrestling out in like basically the woods, I guess, at this time on this tour.
He was doing this tour as a favor to, I want to say, the Bear Man. It was a favor for him. I was actually supposed to go with him. He asked if I wanted to go, and he kept saying, come on, just go." And I said no, because he had just bought me a little dash hound. And this dog would not housebroke, and I knew my mom was going to get rid of it because he would buy me animals all the time. Lizards and stuff. I mean, just go to the pet store and buy whatever, and then my mom would get rid of it when he was gone. So I was like, no, no, no. So yeah, he was going there. He had lost a lot of weight. He was with a trainer, and his plan, or him and my mother's plan, is that he was going to go to Japan for a few months out of the year and just do that because he had a very large fan base in Japan. So she had seen him 2 weeks before he had passed. It'd been 2 months since I mean, I hadn't seen him for 2 months because he was training. And then he flew into LA as she drove down there from Bakersfield to meet him. And they were down there, I think, maybe a day or two. So she saw him 2 weeks beforehand.
And he passed just after he was finished with WWE, right? It hadn't been too much longer.
WWF actually, he was, there was a, okay, so the WrestleMania with Roddy Piper, he was retiring. They were really good friends. Uh, he was scheduled to win that WrestleMania. But then when they came in, and so he had negotiated it, and he was supposed to get a $10,000 um, I guess like a bonus for cutting his hair, and then he was supposed to the next WrestleMania get that. Nothing was in writing, so he didn't get that. So then he was mad because Vince was not going to honor that anymore. And so he basically told Vince to F off, and Vince told him, "That's fine, you're still under contract for 6 months. If you work anywhere, I will sue you." So for 6 months, my dad didn't work. He wasn't able to because he was under a contract with him. So during that time, yeah, he wasn't working then. And then he, like I said, he got with the trainer. So he was going to do something, but he was not going back to the WWF.
Now, when he gained all of that weight over the short period of time, was that specifically because he thought that look would be better for his gimmick that he was doing of the half gay guy, or was that just part of it happened by accident?
He just, he had always been like that. Actually, I'm like that. My son is like that. I mean, you just balloon up, you can gain weight very quick. He, in high school, was, at one time, he just ballooned up and gained weight. And actually, his wrestling coach had told him, if you're going to be a pig, I'm not even going to train you. And so with that, he had a leg break. He had broke his leg. He was off work, but he just ballooned up. It was not intentionally, but it's I know he gained it very fast. One time up to 325.
And what are some of your memories of him? I know you're really young, but I've always heard he was a nice guy to like his friends, very funny guy.
Yes, his sense of humor. I remember my mother had a naked lady. It was a black naked lady statue, and her ball of her foot was holding up a light bulb. And so my dad took moss from her plant, like one of her plants, and super glued it as pubic hair. I thought it was just hilarious. Being 8 years old, I thought it was just great and just laughed so hard. Fun, very fun. We'd go, sushi, ice cream. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. Swimming, barbecues. I remember parties with other wrestlers that went on all night long. Um, they were party people, as I've seen. And I said, "Oh, yes, I can see that happening." Uh, just very, very short. I mean, that's it. Uh, what he said went. You didn't sit there and question why. If he told you to do something, you did something. Uh, it's to my grandma in New York. I was just like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you would say something like that to her." And he goes, "Oh yeah," he'd put the old bat on the phone when he would call. And I just started laughing. I was like, "Oh my gosh." Practical jokes all the time, all the time. He would have me. One time he had me, we were in a motel room, one of his meet matches. And he goes, "Oh yeah, just go in here and go in the closet and then jump out at the room service guy. It'll be so funny." I mean, just jokes and practical jokes all the time. Um, a lot of fun, very smart ass, I would say. And I think my sister and I and two of my children definitely have the wit of stuff like that. But yeah, just very, you know, mellow, easygoing. But he got pissed. I remember one time there was a fight between him and my Aunt Cindy's boyfriend or husband. And I saw Rick 2 days later, and he had a black eye. The white part of his eye had blood in it. And I just remember, I didn't remember what the fight was about, but I remember I go, "And the winner's Adrian Adonis." And my aunt was telling me to shut up. I was probably like 6 or 7. She's like, shut up, don't say that. But yeah, you were his friend, you were his friend, and he's going to stick up for you no matter what.
Is it true he was like an amateur wrestler before he got into professional wrestling? Because he was known for being a bit of a tough guy behind the scenes.
Yes, he did amateur wrestling. He did wrestling in high school. He was very athletic, did a lot of sports. He did semi-pro football in Canada, my grandmother had told me. Uh, Baseball, wrestling. He taught himself to ice skate so he could play hockey. But the wrestling he did do before the WWF, he did do wrestling.
You mentioned that he took you to some of the matches. Do any of the matches you saw him in stand out?
I got to meet Cyndi Lauper and Lou Albano, and I thought that was just the coolest because Goonies was out about then, and so I thought that was just amazing. I remember a match in Anaheim, and I remember being just, oh my gosh, I could not believe the crowd of the people just yelling and throwing things and just going nuts. And my mom said that it was, she had told a lot of people the matches were just insane. They had egged her car before. There was a kid who threw a rock, hit my during a match and broke open I think it was like right above his eye. He had to take pictures. He had a couple stitches there. Uh, but oh yeah, I remember those. And then I remember one. I remember the hotel in Fresno, and he took me to the gift shop, and he said, "Go ahead and pick out whatever you want." And the fans just swarmed. They kicked everybody out of the gift shop to look at something, and I just remember going, "It scared. It scared." I mean, being young, it scared me. I didn't understand why they were all wanting to talk to him or yelling at him or saying these things about him because he didn't like other guys. I mean, he was married to my mom.
Now, did he tell you that wrestling was predetermined, or did he keep that from you?
No, he would tell me that you already knew who would win the matches. Uh, I knew that, but I also know that they take hard hits, and there were sometimes blood, there was sometimes bruising and things like that. But I remember at school they told me wrestling. A kid told me wrestling was fake, and I got in an argument with them because no, you were really fighting. But I didn't realize what the kid had meant. It's all set up. That was the fake part of it.
Were you considered like more cool because your dad was in the WWF and it was extremely popular back then?
I was going into, what is it, the third grade? Third grade when he had passed, or going into the fourth grade, I believe. Third or fourth grade. It's been a little bit. And before that, there were, kids that knew because I went to school there and he sometimes would walk me to the bus stop or I had friends over. And so some friends knew, but it wasn't until like junior high, high school that with the last name, and then my sister had told somebody, and then pretty soon, it was all over at school that, oh yeah, her dad did this, this, and this, and it was not really treated different, but just a ton of questions. I'm like, I had no answers for, and just didn't really like to talk about it.
Where did you grow up? Were you moving around a lot because of his job, or?
Him and my mother moved around quite a bit. Uh, she actually, she actually ran off and eloped with him in Georgia from Bakersfield. They met in Bakersfield, and that's where all her family is. Um, but we lived in Bakersfield the whole time and we'd go back. And I guess I don't remember going back before with him to New York to go see his family. But afterwards we had. But I always remember his mom and dad and my Aunt Sue coming out to Bakersfield to visit, and they'd stay a couple months during the winter. Uh, but no, Bakersfield until I was 11, and my mother remarried, and then we moved from Bakersfield to Northern California. From there, because my mother's family's in ranching, and her new husband they were in ranching together, and so then we moved to Nevada, 4 or 5 different places there: Montana, Arizona, Oregon, Oklahoma, and we were in Oklahoma for about 13 years. And then my husband's job, we came to Colorado just about May of last year.
Okay. Now, did he have any close friends in the wrestling business?
Um, Morocco, there was him. There was Orton. I remember going to Murdoch's wedding, and his stepdaughter, because she was about my age that we were playing with. Uh, and also Roddy Piper. He was really close with him. Actually, Roddy Piper dated my aunt, my mom's sister, for a little bit. But really, when he was home, he was home. So there wasn't a lot of people in and out. I mean, there were a few people, trainers. I remember Bobby Davis was there all the time. Him being around. Tom Touchstone. He came to the funeral. I remember meeting him. But Roddy Piper, I met him after the funeral at the reception that they held, and I talked to him a little bit, but I didn't really know him.
Now, you sent me a bunch of pictures, which I really appreciate. We're going to put them up.
This one, it's 5 women in there, and my mother's the second to last. That's my mom and all of her sisters before the funeral. There's just one of my dad that has, it shows the more of the tattoo on his arm that was the Italian flag. There's one of my mom and dad sitting together, and they are actually up in Kellyanne, or sorry, well, yeah, going towards Kellyanne, California, with Twin Oaks Saloon, which my mom, that's where she was raised, 50 miles from Bakersfield. And my mom's pregnant with my sister, and they're sitting on their lap. Then there's a family picture of my dad and my mother and myself. There's a picture of my sister and myself that was about 3 years ago. Her name is Gina. She was a second grade teacher. She now has her master's in education for kids. There's a picture of my daughter, Adrian, who's my oldest.
Oh,
One of
so
my
you
three
named
girls.
her after him?
Yeah, yeah, she's with the one that's really smart ass and witty and has the comebacks and practical jokes. There's a picture of my son who's in a football uniform, and he absolutely loves all sports, football and wrestling and baseball. And he actually, my stepfather, played for Atlanta Falcons as offensive tackle, and so my son gets his number 77. Uh, there's a picture of a magazine. It's my mother and my dad's holding me up and giving me a kiss on the cheek, and it's in Japan. I actually remember that. There was actually the reporter came and stayed at our house for 3 nights and spoke very limited English, and I remember having to hurry up and clean my room. There was a picture of my mother, and well, it's my stepfather's in it too. My 3 girls, my sister before she had kids. There's a picture of my dad in a red shirt, my mom in a white shirt, and I'm being held. That was at my baptism in New York. My husband and I. There's a picture of my dad with blonde hair, and he's holding me, and then I'm holding my sister, and then there's our pit bull on the side. I think that's so funny because I just remember he came home and he had this blonde hair, and I was just, why is he dyeing his hair? I mean, horrible dye job. And I remember him coming home from Japan and having all these bows, like Christmas bows in the bag, because he was like, "Oh, go get your stuff," because they have the best gum. It's like this blueberry bubble gum that he'd always bring back from Japan, and I remember Christmas bows and stuff. I just remember thinking that was so silly. There was a picture I actually purchased on eBay, and it's of my mom and dad and I eating ice cream. Uh, I was looking on Facebook, and because most of my grandparents in New York have passed away, and I don't really know too much. My dad was adopted when he was 7 days old, and so we don't know really anything about his, background or anything like that. Uh, there was a friend, one of his really good friends in high school, and he had called me. I was at work one day in the ER, and he had called me and he said, "Oh, I have these pictures of your mom and dad when I came out to California." And so he sent them to me, and it's my dad and my mom sitting on a couch. And I just thought that was so cool that he had sent those to me, and he remembered my mom. And he was telling me that my dad, after he left high school, he was a manager at a gas station, but he had all of his friends doing the work, and he was out there drinking beer with all the other people. And I was like, oh my goodness. There's a picture of my sister, her husband, and their oldest daughter. And then the next picture is my dad and his friend. And the friend had sent me, this is the guy who had sent me all the pictures, and he had called me again, and I had missed the call, and he had passed away a week after that, so I didn't get to call him back. He sent me a picture of my dad in his leathers as the Kingsman, and he said, yeah, they were in a motorcycle gang, and I was like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I knew nothing about that. My dad
So
went to
that was
practice.
legitimate. He was in a real motorcycle gang.
Yes, and I did not know that until the Kingsman, and it's in New York, and there's pictures of him on the bikes and stuff too. I mean, he didn't have a motorcycle when we were younger, or when I was younger, growing up. He never had a motorcycle. I didn't know he knew how to ride one, but yeah, he was in a motorcycle gang.
He would have been wrestling at that time too, I guess.
Probably a little bit before wrestling, because
Okay.
when he left high school, I think he was trying to get in it as a real deal wrestling, not the stage stuff. But yeah, he was trying to. Then there's a picture of my family, picture of my sister and myself. We were at a fundraiser, and it's with Wilford Brimley. There's another picture at a reception, and he's pretty young. Right here was that. This is another picture the friend had sent me, and he's sitting in a black leather jacket, and I just laugh at the hairstyle and everything. Uh, Another thing we always had at the house, looking at this picture, is a hot tub. They always had hot tubs and pools, and they always drove Corvettes. So I think that's just hilarious. And then there's pictures of when he was younger. Like I said, he's baseball. He's he was rough and tough on everything. I guess, boy, 100%, just into everything. Never laid down. Never took a break. There's a picture of my mother and two wrestlers. I do not know who they are on there. They were at this reception after the funeral. Then my father laying down on the couch, which I remember he would always keep the house so cold. You would, need a sweater on in the middle of summer. And he has a blanket that my grandmother made. She loved to knit her Afghans. There's a picture of my dad in the hot tub, and then a picture of my mother and my grandmother before the funeral. Then there's a picture of his dad, my grandpa Frankie, and my Aunt Sue at the reception. And then there's a picture of all of them. And I think that is all just some ones of when he was younger. But I guess he was a real hellion. My grandmother told me that a neighbor lady came to her and started complaining about him. He's picking on my son. She goes, he's 2 years younger, because he was a bigger kid. I mean, he was a big guy, and he was actually sticking up for the kid, another kid who was being picked on. So he did always go for the underdog, and he, for those that were, with the least amount of chance to win in anything, he was there for him. But he was wild too. My mother would tell me he would go to the park where the bums were in Bakersfield, and drink whiskey with them. Take bottles of wild turkey during Thanksgiving. I was like, oh my goodness, he did not. So these stories that I hear from the other wrestlers, like I saw one the other day of him and Roddy Piper got arrested, and one of them, I think it was Orton, was naked when because he sleeps in the nude, and
Yeah.
and I go, oh my goodness, did this happen? And oh yeah, it happened. I said, I just love how it was. The car was stolen, and I said, oh my goodness, that's just cracks me up.
Well, if he was hanging out with Piper, Piper was one of the wildest out there. You mentioned your son might become a wrestler. He's already in football, so there could be another generation down the road.
There could be. I was never. It was always, when I was younger, we didn't talk about my dad after he had passed, because it would hurt my mom, and she'd be upset. So we just didn't really talk about. We could later on we could say something, but you just did not talk about it. No wrestling, no hurry up and change your channel, because she would. I mean, and she'll tell you today he was her. Yes, she's been married, and my stepfather passed April 2018, and they were married 20 some years, and she was married to my dad for 10. But that was her best friend. I mean, they did everything together. She could go, out with my aunts or girlfriends when he was gone, and he didn't get upset. She could. I mean, they had fun together. I remember them only getting in one fight, and it was just like an argument over it. It was nothing bad. She just told me it was a lot of fun, and that was her best friend. They could do anything, and I started laughing. So I don't, but we just didn't talk about it. So my girls, my girls didn't really, they didn't really show an interest in it. I played basketball and volleyball and softball, and then tore my ACL, and that was the end of that. But my sister played basketball, but we didn't, nothing was ever talked about, like, oh, well, you guys should go wrestling, go do something for your dad. That was never even heard of. Now my son, he, called my stepfather Papa, and we didn't talk about the other. Well, that was other Papa, is what he would say. So now that we're not right that close with my mom, he's seeing a lot more, and he's like, oh, and of course wrestling. He goes, I don't want to get naked and wrestle with guys. That's not what they do, buddy. Then he sees that, and he's like, oh wow, I want to do boxing. I don't know about boxing. I go, you get in enough trouble. But yeah, he's interested.
I see. Well, it's always easier for the wrestlers that have the last name to get into the business. So that's something that you should keep in mind. Any final thoughts about your father to close this off? Thanks a lot for talking to us.
Oh, I am just really, I guess I would say, grateful for him being in the profession he was in, because I can see the videos, I can see the tapes, I can see things of him that normally I wouldn't see. Like I love the clip of him and Orton, or not Orton, Murdoch, when they go to New York, and my dad's just yelling at people to shut up and get inside the house, and I'm like, oh my! I mean, my mom goes, no, it was all unscripted. I mean, all of their interviews and things they would say is unscripted. They had free reign, and I was like, can you imagine them saying, these wrestlers saying that now? I said, oh my gosh, they would. Oh, I just started. I blows my mind. But I just, I'm just very grateful for all of that. I hear little stories, and I hear, this and that, and then of course I have family members that say, "Oh yeah, that happened." Uh, I remember, like I said, him. I remember the smell of. You don't forget the smell of marijuana, and so I remember he smoked weed a lot, a lot, and I remember he'd hide it when my grandma from New York came, and he had a big fish aquarium with. He had all these saltwater fish, and then had a couple like Oscar fish and all this stuff, and he'd hide his weed in the fish aquarium at the bottom. Don't tell your grandma. I remember taking my grandma in there and opening that door and saying, "Look what my dad's been doing." Of course, she didn't say anything to him, but I remember. Oh yeah, I remember weed all the time. As for the coke, I go, I didn't really know too much on that, being as young as I was. But then, I remember I go, oh, my Aunt Cindy had told me, because my Aunt Cindy's kind of a wild one. She had told me that you didn't mess around with my dad. He had bought an 8 ball of cocaine for my mom for her birthday, and they went in the other room or something. They left the area for a little bit, and the cocaine and the Coke Gold, the Naked Lady Gold. It's like a naked lady, and I remember seeing this, and my mother still has it. 24 karat gold Coke spoon, and it's like a little lady pendant that you would wear. And I just thought it was a necklace because my mom has some funky jewelry from the 70s, and she that came up missing, and some money. And I guess my dad kind of thought who did it, and my aunt said that he pulled a gun on this guy, and pretty soon all this stuff magically appeared. And I was like, what? She goes, there's a gold Coke spoon. I go, there's a gold Coke spoon? And she goes, yeah. I said, is it a naked lady? She goes, yes, it is. I go, oh my God, is that why mom had that one long super fingernail that was gold that she would put on? And my Aunt Cindy was like, yes. I go, and that wasn't until I was like 24, 25 that I found out. And then I was like, oh, I remember some wrestlers come in and they were all up all night long. Oh, okay. So I could, I hear these stories and I'm like, I can totally see that. Uh, I really, I don't condone it, but I just teach their own, and I just kind of think it's kind of comical.
There was not that many wrestlers who didn't do that back in the 80s.
Oh, well, yeah. And I just go, oh my, it just blows my mind. And I knew he did. I had asked before because, of course, everybody knows who Hulk Hogan is and this and that. And I remember asking my dad, I went to the gym with him a couple times when he was working out. And I remember asking him, because someone said something about steroids. And I said, well, you don't do steroids because, my dad wasn't all muscled out like Hogan. Thinking, and he goes, oh, yeah. I mean, so I know that they all did the roids on there, but the party, and I was just like, I was like, wow. I just makes me shake my head that there was that much, and they're that open about it. It just cracks me up that was my mom and my dad. Oh my gosh, they don't do that. Oh yes, they did.
It's amazing that they could keep the brutal schedule that they did, plus go to the gym, wrestle every night, travel,
And then go
plus
out and
party on.
party. I'm like, I can't. Oh my goodness. I'm like, if I'm past up 9 o'clock, 9:30, I'm like, oh my gosh, the next day. I was like, I don't know how they did it. Like, just it cracks me up. But yeah, Have you interviewed, like, I remember thinking when I was little and the car wreck, the Bear Man's son, his mother had actually passed before his father did. And I just
Okay.
remember thinking, oh my goodness, where's he going to live? And I guess he had an older sister that, and she was married or something that he went there. I just remember thinking how horrible that was for him to, have because he was my age, 8 or 9, and oh, that was horrible. And then when we went back, we met the other Kelly twin. My sister and I did when we went back to New York. And, just to think he was sitting right next to my dad, and my dad was in the center, wasn't wearing a seatbelt. That was a big thing afterwards. My mother was seatbelt strickler after that wreck. But the brother, he just had to have a rod put in his leg after, 3 deaths in the car and just a rod.
And supposedly the driver may have been drunk as well, apparently.
The driver, I don't, I have not heard. My mother had not said that. She had said that the driver had actually, they had to pry his hands off the steering wheel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like he was just grip. And if you're drunk, you're really kind of limber,
Yeah.
your reflexes are more, you're not going to have that tensed up. I remember that. And then I guess my father did not die at the scene. He was not drowned. He was ejected from there. He had actually died in the emergency room. He had a torn aorta, lacerations to his liver. But I mean, with a torn aorta, you're not going to have that much time. But he was crying or out, yelling out in the middle. He was in the middle of the road, yelling out in the middle of the road that it hurt. It hurt really bad. And the ER doctor had wrote my mom a letter after that. But no, it was not. I read these things. I was like, that didn't happen. But I mean, they could have been partying, driving down the road. I'm never going to say never.
Well, thanks again for talking to us. Maybe I'll ask you more questions down the road, but I'm going to edit this and get it out in the next few days. I'm sure his fans are really going to appreciate it.
It is, it's so crazy seeing that he still has fans. I'm just going to say it. I will be 40 in March, even though I'm going to pretend to be 32 again. Um, but that for that long, and to have the fan base still that he does, it amazes me.
I think YouTube helps a lot too, that it's so easy to go back and look at that now. And he he really got over well with that gimmick, especially like when he did that gay guy gimmick. People really remember that.
They do, and that you'll hear him. I saw on a website because I was searching here. I just typed in his name, and it was something for the gay and lesbian community, and he was like their poster person. And they said he actually was gay, and I was like, no, he had a wife and kids. Was it? But I was like, hey, I just that was unheard of. Think about it. The '80s, HIV was coming out. That was, I mean, hated, hated, hated. And of course, he took it with a smile as a challenge to be opposition, not, hey, I'm going to do it and I'm going to do it great and best I can. And my mom was telling me that they would have like fresh flowers for the flower shop deal. And I said, no, they do not. And she goes, yes, yes, they did. I remember to
Did he
Matt.
ever give you any makeup tips?
No, and I don't really know who did his makeup. Honestly, I remember Jimmy Hart coming out, and we were at the Anaheim show, and asking for some lipstick from my mom. Do you have any like hot pink? And my mom goes, no, I don't have hot pink. And I was like, why does he need lipstick? And she goes, because he has to get dressed up for work. And I was like, oh, okay. And I still didn't, I didn't see all the. He never watched his fights at home. He never watched his interviews, and but I remember my cousin. My cousin had told me that some girl was traveling with my dad. She saw it on TV, and I go, no, she's not. And being young, I'm like, no lady travels with my dad. And I guess it was some ladies doing his finger. I see it later on. They were buffing his fingers or fingernails or whatever. And he said, yeah, they travel with me. And she had seen that, and I didn't know what she was talking about at the time. And I was, just remember thinking, no, he's not. But yeah, it makes me laugh so hard to see some of those things. It just, my son at first, he's like, why is he doing that? Because it was what everybody has something, he was a bad guy and this is what he dressed up as, and see this guy. Oh, okay, that's funny now. So then he got it down, but I don't know. I just can't imagine picking up a persona like that and then going with it as one of the, in the 80s, homosexuality was frowned upon. And that was the worst thing ever. And he just took it and ran with it. And I don't know how.
Did you have his action figure?
That is so funny. There was a story about the action figure. He had passed, and my mother went to Los Angeles to receive an award. And I think Bruisers, the wrestler that was stabbed in.
Oh, Bruiser Brody.
Yep. His wife went down there, I think, at the same for and received an award for her husband as the same thing during that time. And my mom was reading a wrestling magazine afterwards, and she had seen these dolls, and she was like, "What?" So she had called Vince and said, "Hey, did Keith get a doll made?" And he goes, oh no, we didn't get around to getting one made." And so my mother's looking at the back of this wrestling magazine, and there's my dad's doll figure. And so there was just a lot of things, and she took Vince to court, and for that, and it was so weird. Just about 4 or 5 years ago, she got a check from the WWF for royalties for like $200. So she gets one quarterly, and they're usually in a big amount of like 40, $50 quarterly. So I don't know what all that is. We were going to kind of look into that some more, but the action figures, we each have one, or my mother, my sister, and I each have one. And then I've picked up, on eBay, I've picked up a couple or two now for my girls to give each one to all my kids. But yeah, and then I've seen there's some other ones. I don't know who makes them. There's a Hasbro one and a different one, but I've seen those. And then I just recently saw that there are trading cards.
Yes, there were back then, right?
Had no idea there was trading cards. Just picked one up on eBay.
Do you think that they're ever going to put him in the WWE Hall of Fame? He's obviously deserving of it.
I do not know. I do not know if it's a kind of a vindictive thing on Vince's part because of the way they separated. Because when he passed away, my mother she didn't get a phone call, flower cards, anything from Vince or Hulk Hogan, which my mom's like, whatever, teach their own. But she was just saying, not a thing, not a anything. Then he had, lied to her about the doll. He had, I don't know. There's just some things that I don't know if maybe that's the causative factor in that. Because I've seen some people that they have inducted, and I'm like, who is that?
Yeah, he's more deserving than many of them.
And I see, even though he was a really big guy, he could move. He could move pretty fast. And I was like, it looks like if he got you, you might be in a little bit of, trouble there because like I said, watching him, I'm like, as big as he was to move that quick.
And he also had a very long career with the WWE back when it was WWF, and I think even before that. So
before that, he wrestled a lot. Well, him and my mother lived in Amarillo.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of wrestling there. And then I just know he'd always go to Japan. He went over there quite a bit. But yeah, he did wrestle a lot. And I have some of those. I have some pictures from there. He was actually wrestling with, I cannot think of that company's name. But anyway, he would come to Bakersfield, California. And my mom was dating this guy who he was working, and so he was asleep in his truck waiting on my mom to get off work, and they went to, it's a Basque restaurant in Bakersfield called, it's down now, but it's called Chateau Basque, and my mom's boyfriend was asleep, so she snuck into, it's a restaurant, and they have a bar section, and so she actually ditched the boyfriend and was in there, and my dad was trying to hit on her, and she was like, he's too cocky, I don't like him, and then they got to talking, but my grandpa, her dad, and my cousins and a couple nephews had went to the wrestling match earlier and had seen him wrestle. And so I just thought that was kind of funny. And then pretty soon, 3 months later, my mom's taken off and my aunt's driving her to the airport and she's flying to Georgia to go get married to my dad. And they're traveling all over before she had me. And for 2.5 years, they were married before I came. And just, he loved wrestle. I mean, she's told me he absolutely loved it. She didn't like it so much because of the fans and stuff, but
Yeah, because he was a heel.
yeah, she goes, they get take it. She goes, they get carried away. And I just remember being in the gift shop going, oh my goodness. And I couldn't pick anything out. It was scary. All these people are yelling at him that he's going to hell. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, thanks again. I think we got a good interview here.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support us on patreon.com for $1.99 a month to watch our full shoot interviews ad-free and help our channel grow. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.